Hello and welcome to episode 29 of The Dive. We have made it all the way here to Shanghai, and in honor of two LPL teams making it to semifinals, Froskurinn is joining us. How you doing?
Yay!
Here to gloat.
Yeah, I'm a big gloater.
You're so happy right now.
Froskurinn is actually the least excited of anyone that the LPL teams are in the finals. The fans are happy. The LPL teams are happy. I'm happy. Like, I've been waiting for the LPL to get good, so to speak, for a while. And like Froskurinn's just waiting for it all to come.
It's hilarious. All backstage, you know, Deficio and Papa and Jad, they all come and they're like, I think RNG have a really good chance. I'm like, no, RNG are gonna lose to Fnatic.
And they just keep winning. So what are you gonna do about it?
Cry.
See if the Korean teams can beat them. I guess that's what we're gonna do about it.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm Jad. That's Froskurinn. We also have Isaac, who just talked, and Kobe. We're gonna be talking about the quarterfinals that were, and then a semifinals preview. We are going to start with the most recent one and work our way backwards because we decided to do it that way.
We decided to do it that way because we have very poor internet here and we're going to work best off of memory. So let's start with the most recent qualification there, Froskurinn. Team WE. Really intense series there versus Cloud9. Definitely came down to a nail biter where a lot of people started to hang their heads at the very beginning of game number 5, actually. And that's probably what most people want to talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could just talk about the game 5 draft, I think, right off the bat. It makes some sense. We can go into series as a whole a bit later. Because there was so much criticism about this draft. And myself included, I really, really hated the draft. And you know, as soon as I actually saw it, I was like, oh, I guess C9 lost the series. That's unfortunate. But it's one of those things where, you know, the coach is getting a lot of criticism. But just to start it off, I would say that I think Reaper won, and it's arguable, but 4 out of the 5 drafts. I think he actually won the draft in the first 4 games. And this last one, I think, was really poor. But basically, to break it down a little bit, you actually have the exact draft written down, I believe, so we can go through it. But people were very surprised. It was a Janna first pick. It was a Kog'Maw and a Galio second round that they got blue side. And people were super surprised. I was super surprised that Cloud9 didn't take any of them away or ban any of them away.
Yeah, let's go phase by phase because the bans was a huge part of it as well.
And there's also the fact that these teams had already played 4 games against each other, so that's going into this. But we'll start right at the beginning. Tristana, Ezreal, and Jarvan were Team WE's bans. Remember, an Ezreal ban is just in there. And C9 has Kalista, Rumble, and Xayah. And most people's eyes get drawn to the Rumble ban in this particular case.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time that the Rumble ban has kind of actually been an undoing against an LPL team. I believe that was also against Team WE early on during the group stages, but like this random Rumble ban just pops in there. And they did play Rumble Jace versus TSM. That was the smashing game in week number 2. So, I mean, there is a little bit of footage of that being on the table, but otherwise 957 is not known for his Rumble performance, and it's very rarely played in the LPL.
When you're thinking about other reasons, though, the first thing that comes to my mind when I do see a Rumble ban like super early on like that is if you're not even that, if you're trying to block AD mids, because if you're banning out top lane AP threats, then that might be, you know, going for a 2-for-1 in the ban. Like, we don't have to ban Jace and Lucian for mid lane. We can ban Rumble instead. So, you know, that might be part of it. I did think it was really interesting, actually, that Reaper was even tweeting out now that he is planning on doing VOD reviews and talking about the preparation that Cloud9 had and why they lost the game 5 draft. So we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait for that. But for right now, we can continue to, just guess.
Yeah, if I had to speculate, after the first pick, Janna, what everyone wants C9 to have done would have been, well, just pick Galio Cog yourself and then have Galio Cog Lulu.
Yep.
Is like the dream. Why I think they didn't do it, this is just speculation, because they didn't want to lane against Caitlyn Janna plus Jace. Because those 3 things could have been the early push comp. It's like exactly what Team WE had when the Caitlyn composition worked. And I think they were just trying to block that and maybe just didn't respect the Galio enough.
So to me, the thing is, it's like, I totally understand that. I do think, you know, I talked about it a lot that I thought they should have gone for the Galio Cog Lulu. I think it's incredibly strong. But even if you don't want to do that and you're worried about the lane, then to me, the first round just should be simply Caitlyn Galio. Then you secure yourself the pushing lane. You go into the Janna Cog. And instead of your push being essentially denied by the fact that the other team has this Galio and you can't really push into it, you're now enabled. You can actually bring your jungler down. You can be the one diving that Kog'Maw, pushing them off turret and taking super early turrets. So to me, it's just about the Galio. Like, I can understand the Caitlyn over the Cog. I can understand everything else. Either you had to ban the Galio, in my opinion, or you had to take it.
I mean, the thing is then, like, you look at the Sejuani, which was, if we're following your logic, like, you take the Caitlyn Galio, so you don't have the Sejuani. With Ezreal being banned, that opens up the validity of Sejuani to be that much stronger. Because usually when you see an Ezreal ban like that, it's so you can take Gragas, because if you don't ban Ezreal, you grab Sejuani or Gragas, then Ezreal just gets locked in and he just punches your jungler repeatedly in the face. And Sejuani, at least in the LPL, has a really good matchup into Gragas because she can disrupt a lot of what he wants to do. So I agree with you, but I can also understand like the reasoning that with Ezreal banned, it opens up the safety for these junglers. And we saw how dominant Sejuani was, at least in the Longzhu versus Samsung matchup.
Most definitely, Sejuani is super good into Gragas. Back to your point about the mid lane, though, and kind of playing off the tempo of that game. If you have the Galio, it's very similar to Cloud9's Game 1 composition, where they have Aurelion Sol and Shen, and they're trying to use the Caitlyn pushing early and just kind of go all in on pushing early game. And your mid lane has the ability to kind of accentuate your strengths rather than kind of block off your weaknesses. So I do see that angle as well. But then people are even going to go back further and try and dismantle the ban phase, because we're all starting at the pick phase, after this first pick Janna. But with the way that the games are going, you mentioned this is game number 5, right? We've seen 4 games of these, and Mystic is talking, especially even after the series, about how much they're focused on Kog'Maw and how confident he was on that champion. Not only the Rumble ban comes into question, but also the continued Xayah ban, even though it has this huge reputation and it has been so good for so long.
Yeah.
All these questions start to pop up when we have this hindsight.
It's so tricky too, because Mystic Xayah was his most played during the summer split. Like he's a super sick Xayah. He had good Xayah games at Worlds. And I think we're all in agreement that this draft did not turn out the right way for C9. But even thinking about some of the earlier drafts and all the things that were thought about here, like if they don't lock in Sejuani, then they probably don't get their jungler until phase 2, in which case Contracts' jungle pool gets pinched even more, and then maybe you can flame Reaper for having contracts on some random ass jungler, right? Those things could have happened, and I do think it just shows how difficult it is to consistently get like workable team compositions in these environments.
I definitely agree. It is a really tough job, but at the end of the day, it's like, if the Sejuani is that important, the Galio very likely just should have been banned.
I agree.
Instead of the Rumble
Totally
or the
agree.
Xayah, whichever you're actually more concerned about. And I think that's just really where it kind of fell flat. And I think it was disappointing for me and disappointing for a lot of fans. Not because I'm like, Reaper's a shit coach, because I think he drafted incredibly, but it's like, wow, good draft. Oh, this is awesome. This is amazing.
He's so good at drafting.
Like, wait, what the fuck? Like, what happened here?
I mean, I totally understand, and I do agree that drafting was a big issue for Game 5, but I think a big reason why so many fans are outraged is like in the context of how they're looking at the match. They look at this game as the decider, which as an LPL representative, I actually look at Game 1 as the decider. Like the draft phase, I'm like, we had the Maokai jungle game, like that's a throwaway. That was just, frankly, just a donkey draft. Like what was that? And then you guys give us the Galio, so like that's a throwaway draft. But Game 1 was the big decider for me, because that was just a mis-execution from Cloud9. I thought that composition was disgustingly good with the Aurelion Sol, and just like that mid-game missed Baron TP fight, and it was pretty much all over from there. So from an LPL perspective, I look at Game 1 as like that was the deciding thing. And if that game was played in Game 1, I feel like people would feel a lot better about the series rather than having this type of draft be the Game 5. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I think it makes sense, especially because this series went through so many phases. The Game 1 where C9 went early game, super strong composition, but Team WE, I think, also kind of got what they wanted. They just didn't think that C9 would have a good enough early game to be able to win. Technically, they were right with that bet.
Oh, super risky, though.
Games 2 and 3 were also like the singed pick with good performance from the team. Kobe's going to go in a little bit on this Game 1.
The Game 1, though, I feel like there's so it really should have happened. I thought that was such a good draft. You talk about W got what they wanted, but I feel like Reaper totally crushed that
one. They had all outer towers by like 12:30.
Coming out of the gate, I thought that was just such a good draft, and the early execution was there. But as we've seen so many times with early tower pushing compositions, if you stall out on the second line of turrets and you don't make a proactive move in that like 10 minutes of mid game at the secondary turrets and just kind of wait for Baron to arise, that 10 minutes is enough time, and you get enough gold just off the minion waves farming at your secondary turrets that it's very possible for teams like that that have hard engage, or even wards deep enough to teleport back there on to break that siege.
The funny thing about game 1 to me though was, WE made enough mistakes also. It's like, so C9 had this amazing early game, great draft, get way ahead. WE gets the time they need, and it's like, it should be over. But then WE honestly
then it stalls for 20 minutes
a bunch of times, and they started losing fights. And Sneaky was playing the mid to late game fights very well. And honestly, to me, like, yes, there was a ton of different opportunities for both teams, but the pivotal fight in game 1 was just right when Kog'Maw gets a couple crits in a row and kills Sneaky.
The 3-shot.
Whole team is hitting a Mystic, and Mystic goes down. And no bear is used by Sneaky, no flash is used by Sneaky, no heal is used by Smoothie, no ult is used by Smoothie, no locket is used by Contracts. Nothing was used defensively, and it was one of those things where they just underestimate it. Yep. And I heard a lot of people talking about, how can you react to those crits? But to me, when you get in a super late game fight and you have caught the key member on the other team, you use your defensive abilities essentially offensively, and you guarantee that kill, because if he gets that kill and Sneaky's alive, I think the game 100% ends.
Especially things like Locket that have these low cooldowns, and even Lulu Ultimate. We saw him using it early in a lot of fights before. So I was super even Zeke's, right? You're gonna get your damage boost. So I totally thought it was coming through because he had been using it earlier before, but. That's another crushing moment from game number 1. It was a very long game.
I mean, it's easiest to say that Team WE did not reveal anything. It's not because they don't have the ability or they were trying to hide secrets. They simply don't have anything else left in the tank. They know that they're a super binary team. They have like 2 compositions and that's it. So from like that perspective of adaptability, Cloud9 were head and shoulders. They brought like 4 different compositions in that game alone. And then it literally just came down to execution, and Team WE even weren't consistently over-executing over Cloud9, just in the big clutch moments that it took them to get over that series, and that was pretty much the decider.
I think the Gnar was pretty good in Game 5. Like 957 played
getting
one Gnar the
2
whole
solo towers worth of gold,
and then he still was able to just like push in the side lanes, and I thought he played that map pretty well. But I agree with you. Like overall, if you're going to say who prepped better or who drafted better, it felt like C9 was technically like more diverse and more prepared. But
the Singe was huge.
They made enough mistakes that they weren't able to win the series.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, they lost to a better team, right? I think that despite the fact that I was super disappointed, in Game 5 draft and how everything had went, I think that they were given the advantage in 4 out of 5 games, and they failed to execute in those games to actually win. Even in Game 4, which we haven't really touched on, I thought their late game and team fighting,
I thought they hard outscaled.
Yeah, I thought it was massively better, and they failed the early game. Game 1, they failed the execution. Both those losses were super winnable, and they were given advantages in draft, and getting 2 wins off Singe and then forcing the other team to have to ban it every single time is also another big advantage they had. So I think they prepared well, they played well for the most part, but at the end of the day, WE was better.
Yeah, I just want to give a lot of credit, to the preparation and adaptation. These words that we've been using over and over that are so important at Worlds. Bringing out new picks, both to you be able to come up with the possibilities that X champion would be a good counter to whatever is meta right now, and trying to actually step outside that box, but having the players also be able to play those champions and execute so quickly with a little bit amount of time. Well, it's super easy for it to be like, when you had all the outer turrets down in game number 1, Cloud9, you should have just had the Shen teleport in and dive his turret and break through, and you should have won the game so quickly there. But to be able to be flexible enough to play all those different strategies and have a finite amount of time to practice, it was very impressive to me with how much they actually did bring out. That being said, WE definitely deserved that win, and more impressive. Definitely credit there.
Yeah, no, I just feel like WE as a team they're better than everyone on like one composition. But if they don't get that composition, it's pretty much donezo.
Well, good thing they got Galio, Jetta, Kog'Maw.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question at the end of the day is, will they keep getting Kog'Maw at all, right? Like, if people are so convinced that this is just a Kog'Maw thing, then going into the semifinals, you can literally just ban it every single game, right? And force him to show you something different. And if you, who are like the champion of WE, are saying, they suck at everything else, then force them to show you that they don't, right? And I do think, to be fair, we saw incredible execution from them when they did run Caitlyn early game strategies. It's not that they can't run anything else, but it is always through Mystic. It is always reliant on him having success.
And that's what I really love about the LPL teams. It's that they have like these really clear weaknesses and these really clear strengths. It's the fact that they keep sacrificing everyone on their roster for Mystic, and they will always prioritize that ADC. But why do you need to do that when you have a great jungler like Condi, who never gets to play an early game because he never gets to prioritize Jarvan as a champion, so he can have that early game advantage? Or CA, who's, yes, he's great on the Galio, but everyone also saw his Talia, and that was excellent. That was a big pivotal reason why they were able to turn game 4. Like, that guy has an amazing LeBlanc, he has an incredible Talia, and I mean, it's Galio, so he'll probably look good on that champion, anyone does, but any other champion, it's just like a dumpster fire.
Yeah, and I also think there's an interesting thing that happens when you spend so much time watching C9 during the regular season, then you watch them play up against like Team WE in a best of 5, and that's like your main exposure to them. You're just like, man, ban that Kog'Maw one trick, or like, oh, if C9 just would have pressed barrier in this one place, they would have won that game. But you can do the exact same thing from Team WE's side. Be like, man, if they just would have respected that early game bot lane Caitlyn power, they never would have fallen behind in game 1. Or man, if we didn't have that dog like Kog'Maw, or sorry, the Cho'Gath Maokai draft, then we would have smashed that game 3. Like. It cuts both ways, but it's just because we've seen so many C9 games, we talk about it that way.
And 957 as well. I mean, I felt like
he was a beast.
In game number 1, I thought he was trolling. Like, once they actually got ahead, he kept stepping on Caitlyn traps and just getting CC'd like from full to dead. He's oh, it's a 6-item Caitlyn. I can still step on this trap. And then he gets like Aurelion Soul stunned out of the trap. And
I remember
all
that.
his health. I'm like, what are you doing?
That's why this series was so exciting to watch, right? Because both sides were making these big mistakes. And you talk about game number 1, as soon as Cloud9 failed on that window, it ended up going like, 50 minutes or something?
Yeah.
Because
Sneaky set a record of most damage per minute. It was 1,700 something.
When clearly everyone was like, all right, well, Team WE now outscales, right? Because Cloud9 made this mistake or whatever. But no, it keeps on going for like team fight after team fight after team fight. And then you have the barrier one or whatever.
Because you start seeing the arrogance again of Team WE. They're like, we could just push it down mid and probably force this one fight and end it. Or we could walk to Elder Dragon that Cloud9 are all sitting around with better vision. Let's do that.
Oh, man. Anyway, they're going to be in the semifinals. They'll play up against Samsung.
That's our semifinal team.
We're going to keep working back from the quarterfinals we saw. Saturday was RNG versus Fnatic. There were a few questionable moments in that series as well. I want to quickly draw focus to games 2 and 3 of that series because those are the weirdest ones. Game 2 was that Vayne game that Fnatic was super far ahead in, fell apart. And then game 3 was the 19-kill Uzi Kog'Maw game where they then lost to Fnatic. So 2 rather volatile games within that series. Where do you want to start?
The Vayne game for me, I just thought it actually made no sense. I thought picking Vayne, so yes, they got ahead. Yes, it kind of worked, and then they lost. But to me, it felt like when with the picks in that game, when you were going into this Tristana, Lulu, I believe it was, and it was like a Vayne Janna, if I'm remembering correctly. I can't remember everything exactly, but essentially it was Vayne and Tristana. And the 2v2 is just like a guaranteed loss. Vayne cannot really push forward. Vayne cannot actually clear the waves. You're simply accepting that you're going to lose your turret and be down a lot of farm very early on. And it's also a situation where people talk about Vayne as this hyper-scaling champion. We'll just wait till Vayne gets to late game. But then you get to late game on Vayne, and you're a short-range AD carry with an incredibly high barrier of execution, and the Tristana just has way more range than you and just right-clicks. Like, I just feel like Vayne is almost good in no circumstances. Like, if you're playing into a long-range AD carry. If you're playing to a Sivir or something and there's like 3 tanks, then maybe, but I just hate the pick.
But what if you're playing 4D chess like Uzi? That's why he played it in group stages, to put it in Reckless's head that it was viable, and then he would pull it against him. Yeah.
I mean, I think
very deep plan.
A huge issue is, like, I agree with you, the ability to actually even hit the targets to output the damage that she needs, but it's also the fact of, like, sieging is so incredibly important right now, and if you feel that you're not confident enough to siege because your ADC like has to go into the danger zone to even go up and hit the tower, then your only way of pushing the game forward is then to set vision traps to find these superior fights and then rotate. And you're already then at a disadvantage instead of being able to set up a correct siege without having to rely on team fights, especially against RNG, who are such a good team fighting team.
And when they had Maokai, they have point and click CC that's super easy for the Vayne. You don't get to tumble around everywhere. If you misstep once, you're locked up. You're probably dead. So
it was Maokai J4 Syndra that they're up against.
Yeah.
And I remember
that's so scary for
Vayne. I kept talking about how like the game's just going to get to this point where like they can either one-shot the Vayne or the Vayne will kill everyone. And I do feel like Fnatic got to a point. through like the Hurricane Vayne split push that actually got him a whole bunch of farm, even though it seems like a random item for Vayne. But then they didn't push the advantage. And also, after he got to that point, I don't think he built defensively enough. Because I think he actually could have... I think Vayne scales in that way that you can get like 3 items, kind of like a Kog'Maw, like that random Randwiz Kog'Maw build. Vayne is a champion that actually works pretty well with that once you get the buff from your support.
Is this the Talia game? Is that what Caps was playing?
I believe so, yeah. It was Talia Vayne.
Yeah.
And he had Rageblade Hurricane, and I tend to agree if you have like Rageblade Hurricane IE or something, like that's a ton of damage.
Yeah, because Vayne doesn't necessarily need to do Last Whisper, especially with the Rageblade. You're doing so much true damage. You do those 3, and then you go, like, your last 2 items are Mercurial and Randwinds. And then you're still actually winning those team fights.
And you should be able to siege with Talia if you use the wall correctly.
It was interesting because there was the interview with Soaz actually after they lost. They talked about that game. And I thought it was pretty insightful. He's talking about, he thought basically they lost the series on execution, but he's talking about in that game, they were stuck in the mindset that Vayne cannot siege. But he was saying how, yes, but a Vayne who's 10,000 gold ahead, when the team is that far ahead, you can siege. And he thought that they got stuck in the wrong mindset where they're thinking about the constraints of their champions instead of the constraints of their champions when you have this enormous gold lead. And he thought that that was their mistake. They needed to actually, push the pace because while they probably shouldn't be able to siege with a Vayne and shouldn't have been in the position that they were anyway, you have to be able to figure out exactly what to do, not only just with your comp, but based on your opponent's comp, based on the gold lead, based on the tower situation, based on everything. And that's kind of what he thought they failed in, which I thought was really interesting.
I do want to take a moment to really credit Soaz, not only his individual performance, like on his Gnar. I think he was like 1v5ing and killed Show on the back half in one of those games, just above and beyond, went total Super Saiyan to try to save the series, but also coming out and like doing the losers interview. And obviously you could see that, he was putting the blame on the veterans. He actually said that on the interview. So I was actually very impressed with Soaz, despite the shaky start that he had in the tournament with, some of those emotional outbursts on things like social media.
And we are looking at all these series, or the majority of these series, from the Western team's point of view, because that's the team that lost. And so we're like, you're frustrated with the team that wasn't able to pull off, X, X, and Y or whatever to be able to get through these games. But I really did want to also start hyping up RNG because there are some super impressive things for me. First of all, since we've been so high on innovation, the Soraka pick into the Janna, Ming, that opened up so many doors for them. We talk about how important winning pick and ban is. It basically gives them another card in the pick and ban phase, and they almost don't care about one of the big trump cards of Janna right now. And they were very willing to play it into it. Plus the fact that this RNG stalls out so well, and they keep playing for this late game. Talk about how far ahead Fnatic were in that game with the Vayne and how, they should have, just kept focusing and actually gone with the siege because they're 10,000 gold up or whatever. RNG are the ones actually holding their defensive vision, just farming at their turrets, not overextending too much. Save for the couple of deaths that went down.
And I agree with you there. I also think they played weird with Soraka.
You mean overextended and dying multiple times?
Well, okay. So the expectation of RNG is like, whenever I read threads about this team on Reddit, they're saying they feed everything to Uzi. It's
That's
an
my favorite
80 carry
thing.
Meta.
Reading Reddit's opinion of LPL teams, I'm like, let's see what the experts have to say.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? Because even just looking at the post-game stats, you're like, wow, they funnel everything into Uzi. But the 2 Soraka games, they did not funnel things into Uzi. Like, they had Soraka for him, and then they died in laning phase, and then all of MLXG's ganks were top lane for Let Me, right? And they did that actually a fair bit during the group stage as well. So I kind of want to build off what Kobe said, is this is the most defensively capable LPL team we've probably ever had at Worlds, in the fact that they are taking losses early game. Like, Uzi is behind in some of these games because he's not getting jungle attention, and then they still carry team fights and are able to play defense.
Yeah, if Team WE are super binary, RNG historically have shown that they can carry from any lane. 2016, it was a lot about Let Me, and so MLXG and Let Me do have that great synergy. They also played on multiple teams together before coming to RNG. Xiao, who is actually the crowning jewel of this team. I mean, Uzi played less than half the split. They had 4 ADCs play in summer split alone. So, like, everyone sees Uzi on this roster like, it's all about Uzi. It's Classic Star Horn Royal Club.
And Uzi's great.
Yeah, but the thing is we're in an Ardent Sensor meta, so of course Uzi's going to shine more and RNG are going to play around him, but that has not been the case, and so there is always that capability that they can just shift gears and go back to what actually got them to Worlds versus just playing the standardized meta.
And that'll be really interesting to see, if there are any of those kind of innovations going forward again into the semifinals. So we saw a lot in quarterfinals. And to your point, Jat, about the defensive nature of RNG, one of the coolest stats that I had actually seen for them coming out of groups was essentially, so on average, basically everyone on their team was down on gold at 15, but they had an incredibly low amount of deaths and very heavily scaling compositions. So it felt like they are giving just the bare minimum up, basically. They're giving up just enough so that they're not dying and they're not bleeding massive gold leads, but they're not giving up more than that. And they're always knowing exactly where that limit was. And that's where I think they played it super, super well. Because when you have a Twitch or you have a COG or you have these scaling compositions that are team fight based, it's fine to be down a couple hundred gold on each player. It's not fine to contest and then fall down a couple thousand gold on each player because you take away your opportunity to come back later in team fights where they really shine. Exactly.
Two of the most telling stats were that Uzi and Xiaohu have the 2 highest KDAs of anyone at the entire tournament up to this point. And it's because they're playing that defensively till they get to these team fights, and they're executing their mid and late game team fights so excellently with these 2 carries that they have so few deaths. They're at the top of the charts here for KDA.
Yeah, and we just did a bunch of praise. Now we have to talk about Uzi's build in Game 3. Because he had 19 kills on Kog'Maw. That was their early game composition because they got the mid lane Galio in this game, played up against Malzahar, was 6 or 7-0 on Kog'Maw early on in the game. One of his deaths was to the base turret. Then that was the game.
They were going to end the game on.
They were probably going to end the game on that push. Then Uzi died to a turret. And like Soaz hitting him with a house from behind or something.
And it was like 5 turret shots.
What did that have to do with the build dying to the turret?
All right.
He didn't get a
He was really tanky.
Yeah.
He thought he would just outlast it.
Yeah, he did.
Record?
He was so carried. So essentially, this is what happened. So Randwin's Kog'Maw in isolation is actually a good item. Like, it's a very common item for Kog'Maws to build, even in China, especially when you're up against another crit 80 carry like Tristana. A lot of times Kog'Maw scales super aggressively into 3 items, and then it's like you just go tanky from there and you're still going to be able to shred everyone. The problem in this game was Uzi wasn't getting touched. He had a Galio in case he ever did get jumped on. If you're going to build a health item, it should be Frozen Mallet to keep the offenses up. And even on top of that, he actually just didn't need the defense in that particular game, and it ended up costing them down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those situations where, once the Frozen Mallet has been pointed out, I couldn't help but watch every fight from the point of view of what if he had Frozen Mallet. And then it just kind of like burns into your brain where you're like, oh god, he would have killed this guy. That guy wouldn't have been able to flash out a wall because he would have been slowed. This guy's dead. This guy's dead. And you're like, what is he doing? But you do understand the thought process where he's like, oh, if I build this really defensive item, I can position super aggressively and I can get all the damage out. But I did agree that it didn't really make sense. And we had seen so many of the defensive builds that it's kind of interesting to see. There was a bit of a shift, at least from that, between the 2 series. In WE series, Mystic was building ultra aggressive with the early IEs and like almost no defense. And then you compare that with Uzi playing the same champion with even more support, perhaps. Building a Randuin's and like a Ma and a QSS and all these things, like ultra different styles and builds.
I do want to point out when he finally built the Frozen Mallet, he sold his boots, so he couldn't get in range to hit them with the slow, which sucked. But yeah, Uzi, still super good. Questionable Kog'Maw build in that particular scenario. Do you want to move on to the craziest series of the weekend? Do you got any
Let's
more
go
to say about
further
RNG?
back in time now.
Yeah. SKT versus Misfits. Pick'em said a 98% SKT win. 98% of people were correct. But the path to getting there was definitely a little rocky. Let's just talk about that series. That was nearly the largest upset in league history.
Yeah, it was insane. I think the first thing I always think about with that series is going to be Ignar. I think that there was, if you're looking at it from SKT point of view, Faker and Huni were fantastic, but really the innovation coming out from Ignar was where I think that Misfits got their 2 wins. The Blitzcrank game, the Leona game, those are the ones that people are really going to remember, especially Fervor Leona, seeing it like. It was so cool to be casting that game, see that he goes Fervor Leona and thinking like, if he can stack it to 8, this will be nuts. And then at level 1, they have this all in play where he's just smacking down the vein, and he breaks through a Lulu shield in one auto and first bloods, and I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna do it.
That was so ridiculously fun to watch. Like the hype level is at an all-time high there because you're out of the Blitzcrank game. They're like, what else they got? Oh, it's Leona, and she's got Fervor, and she just gets this, double kill for the lane so early on, flashing back to execute the minion for health. It was all things really came together, and at that moment, I felt like just everyone around became a believer at that moment when Leona gets the kills bottom lane.
There's also the idea that like finally it wasn't just chasing the perfection of the Korean meta, it was forcing the Korean team to bend to you to play your game, to like get in the dirt and roll around.
Yeah, and I want to take a small step back because I was reviewing this series this morning a little bit. There were so many gymnastics done in picks and bans, like from even game 1 to game 2. Like game 1, SKT essentially pulled off like this genius switcheroo on early game draft because what ended up happening is they first picked the Sejuani. Misfits then locked in Taric J4, which is like the god tier initiation combo that C9 used in their series as well when they picked up that game because they banned out the 3 other main Ardent Center supports in Rakan, Janna, and Lulu. So you're thinking like, oh man, SKT, like maybe they're out of options. They're going to have to go to like Nami or Soraka or something. And they lock in Trundle, which you just assume is a top lane pick. That baits Misfits into picking Rumble so it can win against the Trundle. And they're like, nah, just kidding. We know that Trundle can beat Taric support. And they pick Jace top lane, Galio mid, like the super early game smash strategy and win in like 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. But then after that was when I thought like Misfits really showed like just insane preparation and switcheroos on their end as well.
And speaking about the draft, after game 1, I think a lot of people were thinking, oh god, this is going to be a bad series. This is going to be a 3-0. This is not even going to be close. Everyone's talking about, Misfits have got to, win early. Otherwise, they're just going to get rolled over. SKT's going to get even better. So it was so crazy when they pulled it off. But I thought that they really intelligently manipulated the draft in the support role by, you don't have to ban out Lulu. You don't have to ban out every single Ardent Sensor support. They focused the ones that actually could survive these all-in engages. They focused the disengage ones, such as the Janna. Mm-hmm. They baited, in some cases, SKT into picking Lulu. And then, Lulu is actually someone who's pretty susceptible to these all-ins, pretty susceptible to this aggressive play. And I thought that they played it so intelligently in the draft, actually, manufacture these support matchups, which got them a lot of wins.
Yeah, in the draft and on the Rift. Like, people after this some people were like, oh, did they completely break the meta? Is everyone just going to do this? No, because Ignar was landing like every single hook. He was going super ham with the Leona. He consistently was getting these engages. And as a team, they were controlling the vision so incredibly well that you get value out of these aggressive supports. But that is such a hard game to play that none of the other teams were like, yeah, we're on board too. We can just slap down a Leona pick here and it'll be fine. Like we talked about, the finite amount of time you have to practice these new compositions as they pop up so quickly led to this one. That's why this one really stood out, and this one was so impressive.
Yeah, and I have a memory of one of the Ignar plays that just kind of showed how great he was. It was game 2 in Blitz where I actually felt like he tilted Faker.
The flash mid.
I went back and watched.
He does like 10 neck rolls.
Yeah, Faker did like 17 neck rolls during that series. But it was when Faker was trying to disrupt one of the Misfits Barons, packaged over the Baron, then like Valk flashed through the blue buff. Ignar, in that play, blindly flash hooked Faker for the kill. Legitimately, he saw Faker running away from the blue buff. Ignar then flashed over the blue buff, got the hook on a Faker, and Faker's like, I cannot believe this, because Faker instantly cleansed the Sejuani ultimate, flashed away into fog, no wards, hook just catches him. And then by the end of that, he actually packaged forward while getting blitz hooked. Like, that's, I've never seen Faker make a mistake that big.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I also have to give a lot of credit to Maxlor, because I think that Maxlor played incredibly well in these early games. And, when there wasn't as many easy hooks in the mid and later stages of the game, it was often Maxlor kind of setting it up with the Sejuani ultimate into a blitzcrank hook and these sort of combos. And they did play it very, very well. But for SKT, I mean, they ended up coming out on top. It was by the skin of their teeth. It was, based essentially on a Misfits failed dive. in Game 4, that fateful dive. No minions. The Baron buff is there.
I mean,
you are up a man and you dive.
That was the closest one that I look back to, and I'm like, oh man, they could have won it there. But also Game 5, it wasn't like a blowout, right?
No, it was not.
The thing about Misfits' game in this series was that they continued to pressure SKT even after making that big mistake where you're like, oh my god, the nerves must have got to them because they were so far ahead. It was right in front of them, the victory, and then they're like, time to try. Oh, we have it. We won. We can. Oh, shucks.
And I mean, even the last game, right? It essentially, I know I talked to Maxler, in his mind, it really did just come down to the Elder Dragon Smite. In Game 5, because they have triple Infernal and Huni. Yeah, and I see you tilt your head. We'll get to it. But
Huni, a jungler's mind, it always comes down to my Miss Smite.
Well,
yeah.
and to be fair, they had triple Infernal, and it's a 5v4 for them essentially by the dragon. And from talking to him, he basically felt like if I got that smite, our 5 collapses on the 4. The Huni TP from behind that kills the carries never even matters because we're charging the team and he's TPing in too far away from the fight to actually have an impact. And obviously, it does not guarantee that they win, but when he missed the smite, they retreat right into the arms of Huni. Their carries get one shot. The game is over. So it certainly was a risky call, and either way you want to look at it, it would have changed how that played out a lot.
It's also the fact that it really demonstrates, why SKT or SKT, because the flip side of that is that if Max Lord does get that smite and they try to collapse, who knows if they're able to get that engagement. It's very easy for SKT to just disengage from it, but SKT set this beautiful trap where, okay, if we get the smite, guess what? We also have the teleport from Huni, and they're going to walk right into Jace's waiting hands, whereas that wasn't the case for Misfits. Not to, discredit their incredible run, but it is just kind of that one step extra, it feels, that put SKT over the line every single time.
Yeah, I thought the Tom Kench pick in Game 5 was also super clutch by SKT because it's not even that good of a champion right now, but it was exactly the situation in which you were going to be able to pick it and find a lot of success.
Into like Thresh, Shen, Sejuani, Varus,
and Syndra. Like, it was insane how much value they got out of that pick.
Yeah, it was always going to get value in every single team fight. There's going to be a CC of the hits that you eat them out of, and yeah, I thought it was really smart.
Yeah, and one thing that has been almost a recurring theme this Worlds is how SKT would look different or a little wounded, or their story is more difficult than previous, but they have actually been pushed to the brink of elimination a lot at the World Championship. I was looking back.
Not in the quarters, though.
So never in the quarters, but overall, elimination games for SKT, which means this next loss would push them out of Worlds. They are now 7-0 in elimination games. It's 2-0 this year. It was 3-0 last year. It was 2-0 in 2013 when they played in the semifinals against Najin. So, yes, they have lost games, and there is a chance they don't win this World Championship, but they have just been so clutch when it actually matters most in all of these World Championship runs.
And that's the thing. It's defining a champion not by their dominance, but by being clutch in those big moments. And we even see that not necessarily, at least in the LPL domestically, it's been defined by being clutch in big moments. You're a big moment player versus just being the reigning dominant champion.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next matchup, which is Longzhu, who were not clutch.
The number one seed.
Number one
seed.
Hype
up Faker after we talked about clutch and how amazing
Favorite
he played.
to win the entire tournament. And at
Faker.
The most shocking upset at that time, Samsung coming through, sweeping them out of the Worlds tournament here. What were your initial reactions during the event, as that was going on?
So, one thing that I remembered was some of the stuff we thought about before the tournament actually did matter. Before group stage, we said, man, this Longzhu team's really hyped, but can they play good tank top laners? And are BDD and Khan and Cuz going to be good on the world stage? And, this team, was really bad in spring, and then all of a sudden was, super good in summer, but I guess they won the LCK, so they're great, and they never lost a game in group stage. And when they had the group stage, it was none of those things matter. These guys are the best. They're going all the way to Worlds. And I think I picked them for the number one team in the pick'em. And then Ambition and Samsung just like bashed them in early game in every draft.
Again, it's also the context of, Longzhu riding the hype coming into Worlds, because it was a very cool story, but it was also a fairy tale. And kind of the same way that Misfits were making their crazy run through groups, that was also the high that Longzhu were riding off of coming out of LCK. No one predicted them to beat SKT. And so suddenly then it's like, oh, this is the team that upset and beat SKT. They're the LCK champions. They went undefeated in groups. And now they're the greatest team in the world. I just think that it ramped really hard without looking at the full context of what Longzhu actually were and taking in the account of like the inexperience with the roster.
To be fair to them though, I don't think it was a fluke with their composition and like with the styles that they ran, because everyone said before the LCK final, well, okay, they had a good run, but the reason everyone's favoring SKT was not necessarily because of the talent of the team. They're because it's a one-dimensional team. Of course, SKT is going to pre-plan and they're going to get bopped. They're just going to show them how one-dimensional they are. And then they played the same way and they smashed them.
Yep. And that's why the hype even got higher at Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, both of you guys and Deficio all thought they were going to win the whole tournament, right? And it's like, and so many other analysts thought they were going to win the whole tournament. And even the people who didn't think they were going to win the whole tournament probably thought they were going to lose in the finals, right? That's the only way I thought they were going to lose. I thought they were going to, 3-1 or 3-0 this series against Samsung. And to me, though, watching it, I thought less about, oh, this is finally them, showing the holes in their game plan, and more, holy crap, they are choking. Like, the individual plays, when I watched these games, I felt like they looked nervous. They looked like scared. They were not playing as they normally did. Even in game one, Longzhu, I think, did have the lead. I think they had the scaling composition, and there were so many mechanical misplays, like Prey, failing to ult Sejuani ultimates, BDD flashing forward and killing himself when he's like the KDA king, the guy who never dies.
Yeah, that was the most surprising thing to me, because talking even like the European players that were screaming Longzhu were all like, just individually, these guys are insane. Like, against any other team, we feel like we can have a strategy, or what we do matters. But everybody had such high praise for these guys, even just as individual players. But then you have things like Crown. Yeah, he does pull out Lissandra and he is playing better, but it's still not like last year's Crown. And BDD, where is he to be found? He has like very little map pressure. All these things that seem like
when he throws it.
All these things seem to be collapsing all around Longzhu.
I mean, the fact that Longzhu were losing 4v5 fights, like there were multiple fights where Cuvée, as the little cannon, was like running from bottom, like not TPing in. And as soon as he got there, it's like, oh, Samsung already won the fight. Like, tells you everything that you need to know about the individual performance for Longzhu, because that just should not have happened.
Yeah, but one thing I will say is that Samsung was the hardest opponent for them to draw in the quarterfinals.
They were.
Right? Samsung, super good, another Korean team. What's funny is the last time a LCK team lost in the quarterfinals, it was when it was a 1 versus a 2 from the groups, and it was KT versus the Tigers back in 2015, and KT got knocked out by the Tigers, who had Prey and Gorilla on it. So, like, it was a super tough draw, and as surprised as we are about Longzhu, like, there was still a very real chance of an upset going into it. It's just all those things that we heard from scrims and the way they dominated LCK just were pretty crazy.
And the coolest thing then is now if we extrapolate that to the semifinal across from Team WE, like Longzhu were a super binary team, let's say. Like, they had a lot of cool picks, but they played like one traditional style. Team WE only have like one set of picks, maybe two, and they only play one single style. And now Samsung, even though they don't have the same experience across from Team WE that they did from Longzhu, can certainly outdraft that team.
And I do want to give some credit to Samsung, because despite the fact that I did think that Longzhu choked, I did think they played much below their level, Samsung looked damn good. Like, they looked really good. Their picks were smart, I thought. Bringing out the Kennen into the Jax made a lot of sense. They showed some flexibility there. The Malzahar, while it got slammed early, as soon as BDD made one mistake, the Malzahar was incredibly effective for the rest of the game.
And they won with Lissandra.
Yeah, and the Lissandra as well.
I think Ambition Sejuani was basically a display of why everyone's talking about this pick right now for Chuggos, right? It was incredibly good.
But then the question is, what kind of ambition do you get? Do you get quarterfinals ambition where he's actually ganking before 15 minutes and making plays happen? Or do you get groups ambition who literally was
zero kills or assists in 75 minutes of gameplay pre-15?
And while we'll look at Crown, we'll be like, oh yeah, sick Lissandra, the Malzahar early game, like doing well. In all 3 of those games, I believe, in lane phase, he solo died multiple times. Like, he was still getting pretty bashed in lane phase. So, like, while I agree that Samsung was very impressive when they got to, like, their grouped up 5 as individual components, they certainly stepped up for that quarterfinals, and they have been shaky.
Let's talk about that next series then. It's Team WE versus Samsung to see who gets in the finals.
Do Team WE get Galio, Talia, or LeBlanc in the mid lane? If yes, win game. If no, lose game.
I thought his Corki, he had one Corki game. His Corki was actually pretty good. I think he's gonna break out of this shell. You're drawing him into this little corner. He's trying to get out.
She's trying to underhype him so that they win.
Yeah. She's been doing it all worlds.
just downplay them so that when they win, it's like, oh man, I didn't know that you guys were so terrible at this game.
Well, even just looking at the semifinals from a big picture, we've seen this story before. 2 years ago, Europe is the host region, however you want to call it. We got Origin and Fnatic rolling into the semifinals to face off against SKT and I'm going to say the other Korean team at this point because it was the Tigers back then. 6-0. It was over. Yeah. This year, RNG's rolling in, Team WE's rolling in. Both have to face Korean teams.
I think that WE's going to get slammed. I think that they are going to get slammed by Samsung.
They're super confident. I went to dinner with them, and they're
WE is confident.
Yeah,
I mean,
RNG beat them twice, right?
WE
they have that
super confident against
in their head.
C9, and then they're like,
and they smashed them. They
were incredibly close. So to me, it's like, Samsung did bring some innovation, did bring some new picks and some creativity, and they just looked like they kind of did what C9 were trying to do, but better. Like, they just had fewer execution errors, I felt like. So, when I looked at W versus C9 and I try to put, like, Samsung kind of in C9's shoes type of thing, I feel like that is a heavily favored Samsung series because I think Samsung is just a better team than C9 was, even before they had this performance. Like, going into quarters, I thought they were clearly a step above the other teams. And the fact that W was pushed to the limit by C9 makes me kind of question how they're going to be able to handle it.
I mean, my only pushback there is that I agree that C9 and Samsung are similar in the sense that they both approached the best of 5 through adaptation and draft phase, and they showed like some creative picks. But otherwise, I don't think that Samsung and C9 share much. Like, they don't, they're not as reliant on Ambition yet. Ambition stepped up to find the carry, but for C9 it's like Jensen and contracts. For Samsung it's more about like the collective unit, like the sum of all of their parts and how they get together. And if it is team fighting, if Samsung don't try to snowball these big early games, and maybe they tried that because they were against Longzhu, like that still gives me a confident 50-50 for Team WE because they are so good at team fighting majority of the time. And if Samsung are just going to try to roll up into a big death ball and try to smash WE, like WE no problem, they'll take that 60-40 every time.
Tell me more about this confident dinner you had with Team WE. So, are there any details as to why they're confident?
Fun fact, CA and Condi are the greatest shit talkers ever. Like, they are just really, and you don't, you look at CA and he like looks super quiet and like almost like timid and reserved.
It's always the quiet ones.
Exactly. He just, from out of nowhere, he'll just cut you deep, and Condi's just a wild animal. But they're just like talking mad.
Did you tell CA about his tiny champion pool, and then did he
his tiny effective champion pool?
Try and make fun of you?
Using the translator, and then 957 always has to like talk them down and be like the really like humble and considerate and very polite one. So it's a pretty interesting dynamic. But they're not afraid of Samsung. They definitely weight the Korean teams to win more so, but they don't believe that this is like a 70-30. They really do believe that this is like a 60-40. And at Rift Rivals, like Samsung was the one Korean team that all the LPL teams wanted to face because they're like, that's the easy win.
I really like that you mentioned 957 though, and kind of the elder of this group, because that guy he's such a smart player, but I do have a lot of questions how he's going to do up against QV, because QV, like, yes, I'm like, oh, will Ambition continue to perform that well? He'll probably have a game or something where he goes pretty poorly or something like that, and will Crown also, be able to be that effective. But I have a lot of confidence in QV in multiple styles as well, so there probably is some flexibility there for Samsung as well.
Yeah, and Samsung is an incredibly difficult team to right now figure out how good they are. Because, they had that super impressive series against Longzhu, and now you're like, well, if Longzhu was going to make it to the finals and Samsung just smashed them, well, Samsung's going to be favorites to the finals.
Great logic, Jay. I like
Beautiful, done. But then you look at the group stage, you're like, Samsung looked real bad against RNG in both of those games. Maybe they can't.
Also,
team
good
fight.
logic. I like it.
So what's it going to be? Is it group stage or the quarterfinals?
I think it's a mix of both, right? And you have to look at WE for group stage and the quarterfinals as well. Like, what is their overall strength? And the fact that, C9, they kind of like scraped their way into the quarterfinals, right? And I think that they had really good preparation. But I still, coming into quarterfinals, felt that Samsung was a better team than C9. Yep. I felt that they showed good adaptation and preparation going into the quarterfinals. I felt that they improved, especially with ambition, but in a lot of ways. And like, regardless of how Longzhu played, I just thought that Samsung, there wasn't a ton to criticize about their play. And I thought that there was a lot to criticize about WE's play. Yep. There was a lot to criticize about C9's play and how they executed. And if the teams are just executing on a similar level, and I believe that Samsung is heavily favored. I believe it is that, like, that 70-30, like if that's a 3-1 or whatever, I think it is, a 3-1 or so for Samsung. I think that they are heavily favored.
My only concern is that in, taking predictions or analysis off of the Longzhu versus Samsung, you're not looking at just like a one-off best of 5. Like, those teams played in the LCK together. Like, we don't know how many times they've probably scrimmed together, how intimately they know each other. And so I definitely think that comes into play in terms of preparation. And yeah, Team WE have looked pretty binary themselves, and so you'd say like, oh, it should be very easy for a team to prepare for that. We don't have any record, at least for this tournament itself, of Samsung preparing for a best of 5 against a team that they don't know incredibly well. So who's to say that there isn't going to be another situation where, CA gets his LeBlanc or the Galio does go through because they believe that, Crown's Malzahar is able to compete with it, and then it's, we were wrong, and we lose one game there.
How do you see it then? Like, what would your prediction be? Like,
Let's do them now.
If I'm putting it at a 3-1 for Samsung, where are you? Because you're saying, you were talking about it more like a 60-40, but that still has Samsung, as a 3-2 winner.
I personally, like, don't get me wrong, Samsung Longzhu was a cool series, but actually watching that series, I did not feel that same awe of this is the Korean dominance. This is why the LCK is so powerful. I was still watching, a lot of individual misplays of dying or not playing around Fog of War correctly. And even in the 5v5s, there were some of them that were quite frankly impressive, but it wasn't to that same level. I'm like, I see this in the LPL a lot. I see this in this tournament from, the Western teams. This isn't far and beyond. So I actually rate WE pretty highly here. I still give the edge to Samsung. Like, if I had to make this prediction on desk, I'm still going to say Samsung, but it's not a 3-0. I actually think this is a 3-2, and Team WE do have a fairly even chance just because Samsung, they like to team fight, and WE are so good at team fighting.
And I think because of the inconsistency we've seen from Samsung, it's too hard for me to say that they're going to smash Team WE. But at the same time, like, Team WE has made enough mistakes that I'm not going to confidently put them over Samsung, right? Which is why I'm hoping that these things actually do clash and we get a couple of 3-2 semifinals. I think there's a very real chance of that. So, like, my prediction is Korea will win, but the LPL will put up a pretty good fight, which is a 3-2. And, like, ultimately, I think it's going to come down to whether or not Mystic is going to be able to win lane phase hard enough against Ruler and Core JJ, because those guys played a hell of a quarterfinal against Prey and Gorilla. And if Ambition can shut that down, like, then that's when we're going to get to 3-0. But I think Mystic is good enough that they're going to be able to win some games.
See, that's my thing. I actually think it's about Ambition versus Condi. Like, I 100% agree. It's about how the 80 carries will match up. But if Ambition doesn't have like a great performance like he did in quarters, then Samsung really don't have anything. Like, you look across from Longzhu, and my big thing of why I back Longzhu is they're basically better pound for pound in every single position and every single player. And I think Team WE have a very similar or an argument for that same thing in terms of current performance. So it's like, does Ambition have this Super Saiyan, it's time to show up in semis and show why Korea is still the strongest, or does he just go back to group phase?
And the thing is, I am giving Ambition kind of that benefit of the doubt because of their run last year. He really impressed me last year on their super long run, because we were saying similar things last year, like, oh, Samsung's versus SKT in the finals, congratulations again, SKT, probably like a 3-0, 3-1 were the edgy predictions, but they really did make them work for it, and Ambition was a huge part of that. So, on the big stage, this guy's a super veteran. Like, I think he does have it in him.
Are you 3-1, 3-2, 3-0?
I'm 3-2 as well. I want to be
5-game series are pretty rare.
If you like disagree with them, then you're like 3-2.
Yeah, 3-2. It's the same.
Well, the reason that was my reason for saying Samsung is going to win it.
Okay.
But
so you think even if Ambition is playing that well, it's still super close?
So Papa Smith told me something like when we were prepping for Worlds like a long time ago or whatever. He was like, Ambition's gonna have a couple of those first blood games where he just starts feeding, and sometimes he can't stop. So
2 of those.
I like this Papa Smithy impression. what is happening over there?
That's the worst Papa Smithy impression I've ever heard.
Ambition's gonna have this.
Every Papa Smithy impression can start with like, in a world where, and then you just keep going.
You also need to see the hand motion.
Yeah.
The Papa Claw.
Yeah.
So yes, in a world where they go 3-2, I think that Samsung wins.
And suddenly he's a James Bond villain.
That was much better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was closer.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. I mean, I'm still feeling the 3-1 or even a 3-0 if Ambition is playing on that level, because I think that I give them the credit, and I don't think that WE is better like pound for pound unless Ambition's having a terrible series, because to me Shie is not better than Crown.
All right, I'm back on Azale's side. 3-1, let's go.
All right.
He says 3-1.
She has been somewhat underwhelming. Like Kuve I favor certainly over 957. The bot lane I think I would give the bot lane to WE based on like overall performance at Worlds and everything, certainly, but based on the quarterfinals, they did go up against the best bot lane in the world, and they did well. So I give Samsung a lot of credit. I think they're going to do well.
The disappointing thing here is you can't see the hand motions. Like the amount of
locking in Isaac and Kobe.
3-1.
Frosk
Whoa,
and I.
I'm still Viscous over here.
You're still Samsung, right, Frosk?
I'm still Samsung.
Okay.
Wait,
but I think it's close.
You got to pick a side, Kobe.
And like and here's the other thing that I'll say.
Where Kobe is a flip flopper. Decide.
There's not much difference between a 3-1 and a 3-2. Like it's such a small twist.
3-2. Let's.
All right, let's go.
This is the third change. This guy can't decide.
I'm formulating. It's not changed yet if you don't lock it in. You have to lock it first.
Press the button. All right.
Yeah.
Once I lock, have never
Is the button
flip-flopped.
pressed now?
I still reserve the right to
locked.
change for Analyst Desk if I want to. Next series is RNG. It's
the VODs
Tuesday.
come through.
Literally no one can stop you.
Yeah,
so
it's
don't
Tuesday
worry.
right now. I
And
can do
one's
whatever
gonna
I
check the
want.
VOD.
Yeah, wait till we can actually look at some VODs and analyze this, because the internet's been rough.
This is coming from straight memory.
Yeah, SKT versus RNG. Uzi versus Faker happened in 2013. Didn't go very well. That's honestly not even comparable now. That was 4 years ago.
They
But the
faced them.
storyline is there. Now it's just RNG, who's already beaten Samsung twice in group stage. 3-1 against Fnatic, who is a European team in the quarters. SKT, 5-game series against Misfits. What's up? Is this the moment?
I think it's not the moment, but I think it's very, very close. Like this one I actually think will be more close than the other semifinal. And I still, despite the fact that SKT has showed so many weaknesses, I'm still so impressed by how Faker played in the quarterfinals. I think Huni actually played very well in the quarterfinals as well. And I think that, when you talk about clutch factor, that's something that does show up time and time again for SKT. And I put so much stock in that. It's one of those things where you can say, oh, well, look at all these weaknesses they have. But SKT time and time again shows up in the big moments. And like Faker is always the guy to pull the game back. He is that person that I do think you can count on. And I think despite the fact that SKT's bot lane had quite a poor performance in the quarterfinals, like over the years, I've built up so much respect for them and for especially, how Bang plays as a player. Like he is so consistent for so long that I don't think he shows, up as this massive weakness for them against Uzi.
But this is my my issue with all of because I'm definitely guilty of the same thing. It's like it's SKT, and that's the context in which you look at everything. But if you just remove that, you just look at this world's performance.
But you can't. I mean, it's like there's a reason that some teams win and some teams lose, right? There's a reason that some teams choke and some teams don't, and SKT never chokes. Like they almost never choke
until they do.
Yeah,
but they went
and they lost the
on
2015 MSI final.
9 series loss streak this split. They didn't win a single game on 7-14 as a patch. They had a really bad meta read. Like SKT has also shown in this split that sometimes they just have a bad meta read, and sometimes it just doesn't work out for them, and sometimes they individually underperform. And like I agree with you that they are an incredible team, but again, if you just cover that up, if you don't see the nameplates, you watch all the VODs, I don't think anyone goes into this like, oh man, SKT are totally just going to smash this.
I think it's really close, right? Like I didn't say they're going to smash it.
Well,
like I said 3-2, really close, closer than the other series, but I think that being a clutch player does matter. And like when you talk about winning championships, I do still believe there's a reason that Uzi has never won a championship, and like you have to look at that to me.
And I'm hearing what both of you guys are saying. It's exactly the same like mental struggle I've had trying to think about the series, because I am the most excited for this series of anything that we're going to have this week, and I think this is what Worlds has been like building up towards. If there was going to be a team that takes down SKT, you'd think it would be RNG, the team that beats Samsung twice, like that has Uzi in the bottom lane. And if we were to isolate it to this year, right, which you obviously can't do it, but if you were to isolate it to this year, I think it's overwhelmingly like, wow, RNG should be favored. Like, Coma bashed his bot lane in a post-game interview. Like, that has never happened before. He's like, yeah, our bot lane had big struggles today, and they need to get better. And they're, like, first rotationing Jace for Huni, and it doesn't feel like they can play around any other strategy. And Faker even got tilted in a game and stretched his neck more than I've, like, ever seen before.
The Faker neck stretch.
God tilted.
He played incredible.
And then untilted and smashed game 4 and 5, right? So that's the balance, right? There's a reason that you say never bet against SKT, and it's because, as we said before, like they are 7-0 in elimination games at the World Championship.
They've won every Worlds they've gone to.
Yeah, but as we keep saying, like,
not a bad record.
But how many
He stretched his neck.
How many red flags do you need then before you're like, Rome's probably about to burn?
The thing is,
I need it to burn before I'll believe it.
It's literally on fire.
That's the damn problem with SKT, is because there have been moments before where you're like, they should actually lose this game.
Show me SKT lose Worlds, and I'll believe that SKT can lose Worlds.
It sucks that we're there, but they've been so dominant. That's where I'm at.
We're speaking to the devout here, Frost. You can't convert. There's nothing you can do. You can't argue with that. They just believe so heavily.
Yeah, he's like, they're too clutch. They have never lost. Which, right?
I mean, the faith is really strong, right? And there's a reason that the faith is strong with SKT more than any other team in the world ever. You know, for League of Legends, I do feel like this is the time though for it to crack.
Yeah. Specifically
because of how the two teams, like the way that they're playing the game coming into this, I think that SKT are going to lose extra games than they normally would on early game strategies to RNG. I think RNG are going to be able to weather that J Storm. Yes, it is Huni in the top side, early picking this J so often. I think that RNG are actually going to be able to counter, and because they get this lead in the series, Uzi will for once be able to finish. And he's going to get back to the finals
and lose to Team W.
I think the things, because everyone's always going to talk about Uzi, but I actually don't think it really has anything to do with him. Like, I'm sure he'll play well this series, and it is important.
If he dies to a turret, it's going to have something to do with him.
But I think the number one thing that people are overlooking is Let Me. I think Let Me is dramatically underrated for how good he's been for RNG, and also the fact of how well he can probably control Huni. I'm not saying he's going to destroy Huni or even beat Huni, but Let Me is actually a very smart player, and people should be paying attention to how he moves around Huni and what he does up there. And then Xiaohu. Xiaohu and Faker, if you ever just go on Faker's stream or you pull up the solo queue, these players play each other all the time in solo queue. They have faced each other multiple times at international events. Xiaohu and Faker have gotten the better of each other. Like, it's one thing to be like, yes, Faker's having a great tournament because he's Faker and no one's ever going to take him down. But if anyone could take him down, I actually think it is Xiaohu.
I would just say that, like, SKT can lose without Faker being, like, taken down. You know what I mean? That's one of the things, because I think that while SKT has shown a ton of weaknesses, I don't really feel like Faker has shown a lot of weaknesses in this tournament. I still think he has been incredible. It's been much more to me about the jungle and about the bot lane, and there comes a point where if your bot lane loses hard enough, if your jungle loses hard enough, that you can be playing the best game of your life and still lose, right? And if SKT were to lose, I really would be surprised to see it be on like, oh yeah, Faker just got slammed.
Yeah, and when SKT lost in Korea, it was Untara and Huni who got targeted out. And Let Me has smashed a lot of people with the help of MLXG. Like, they've been playing around topside, as we mentioned in the quarterfinals. They played around topside a lot, and Let Me's been performing in a big way.
Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think there's ever going to be a case where Faker gets smashed in mid lane and then SKT collapse, but there have been cases in this tournament where Faker was the only guy that was trying to hard carry them out of it, and I don't think Xiaohu's going to give him that same, ability.
Back to that bottom lane, though, even though we have seen, RNG aren't playing for the super early game, there was, when the opportunity presented itself, Uzi on the Tristana with the Janna knocking down the turrets. They immediately recall on that BF sword. He goes up top side. They chain the early turrets, and that was one of the most free game games that they had all tournament long. So I feel like there's going to be one of these. There's going to be one of the early game SKT strategies. And that's already 2 right there. So I'm pushing them over the edge. I actually think RNG are favored.
And I mean, the bot lane has been concerning a number of times, right? When you look back even to group stage, the EDG SKT game, like the last one, where like iBoy is playing Tristana, talking about Tristana, this pressure type thing. They're playing into a Twitch, yes, but this was a 6-minute turret with a 20 CS advantage over Bang's Twitch, which is literally 4 minutes of actual gameplay. The minions get there 2 minutes, and in 4 minutes they got slammed that bad. So that is how they lose. I think it's that in the jungle. I know the traditional wisdom has always been starting Peanut, but I feel like Peanut has been so ineffective throughout the tournament.
He's been so bad
that to me, Peanut should not play. Like, I actually think that they should just play with Blank the whole way through. And I think I have a lot more confidence in him and how he is playing, unless there's a world where they just like, okay, Peanut, this warding style isn't working. Go nuts.
I'll give you
right.
I'll give you a scenario.
Okay.
You're predicting SKT because you never bet against SKT.
I'm predicting SKT because I don't think RNG is a better team.
Okay. If SKT starts Peanut and not Blank, do you want to change it? I'm allowing you, like, they're going to start Peanut, game 1.
No, I still don't change it because I honestly don't think that RNG has shown to be a massively better team, and I do think that like in ultra high pressure scenarios, like I talk about the clutch factor so much because I think it is a very close series, and I think that there will be these critical plays that decide the game. And I have faith in SKT to actually come up with those big plays more than I do some of the players on RNG. But I think it's a ridiculously close series. Like I think it is a 3-2. I just give SKT. I'm not just saying, oh yeah, SKT sucks ass, but I have the faith, so they're gonna win. I think that they're a solid team. Like the problems are very easy to target, right? Like, and I think that they're fixable for the most part.
And I think SKT's clutch factor means if this does go to a game 5, I think SKT wins that game 5.
Yeah,
I think it's really hard for RNG to win game 5. So if I make an RNG prediction, it like has to be 3-0 or 3-1. And based on what I've seen, I think that is maybe even a likelihood. I'm still back and forth on this, right? Because the way Let Me matches up and how Huni actually hasn't had that great of a series, they might be able to shut that down. Bang and Wolf have not been able to win lane. I think Uzi will, if SKT tries to camp him, it won't work that well. And if they don't, then maybe Uzi smashes him. And Xiaohu actually matches up really decently with Faker. So like all those things together make RNG the favorite until you think about the history and the pressure and the fact that they're in front of the home crowd and this is the highest pressure match they're ever going to play, and the fact that they're up against like the gods of SKT.
And I mean, honestly, I just don't think that there's like a big advantage in the top lane. I think that if there's an advantage in the mid lane, it's a tiny advantage for SKT. And then it's like, it comes down to jungle. Like jungle to me is the real advantage for RNG, but MLXG has been so up and down. And that's why it's scary, right? Like that's my point. Is like Kobe's giving me this crazy face. Like I don't think that
my face is perfectly normal here.
That was not a normal.
Just
face.
like his voice right then.
I don't think that you can go into this like and say like, oh, like Huni should be getting smashed. Like Huni, I think has played. Yes, they've played one-dimensionally around him, but he has made it work. He's gone for a different style with the later game tier builds on Jace. He has been clutch time and time again in the side lanes. Faker has been good the whole way through. The jungle has been trash for the most part for SKT. That is the big question mark. And while Bang and Wolf have not been great in lane, they have been excellent in team fights, right? So to me, it's like when you look across the board, the big advantage for RNG is the jungle, but then MLXG can completely throw a game. And I think if RNG wins, the games they win is through jungle advantage. It's not through lane dominance. I just honestly don't see that happening.
But the thing is like we haven't even seen, if you actually look at MLXG, his jungle proximity is off the charts. He's not really spending a lot of time in his jungle, but he's not gaining his laners any advantages. Their CSDs at 15 are usually below average or just like right there. So while MLXG does look very proactive, it's actually not translating statistically for any of his team members.
To be fair though, that's like we talked about this earlier where RNG is playing the super scaling comps, right? And it's like,
and does that even work against SKT?
Maybe not, but with the MLXG jungle proximity thing is like he's keeping his lanes from getting killed, right? That is what he's doing. So it's like he's allowing like a Twitch lane to lose gracefully and then crush in the mid game is how I see MLXG's play.
All right, let's do predictions.
3-2 SKT.
Locked in. Okay, Kobe. You've been saying RNG. What's the score?
3-2 RNG.
You think they'll win a game 5?
Yes. I'm a non-believer.
Are they going to be... So hold on. Are they going to go up 2-1, lose game 4 and win game 5?
I don't agree with your logic of it's giving more credit to SKT if you predict a 3-0 RNG or a 3-1 RNG than it is to predict a 3-2. I don't follow that logic. Your leap of
the game 5 tilt.
Your leap of they're more likely to 3-0 than 3-2. I'm not making that jump with you. So I'm saying 3-2 because
it makes sense.
Because I'm substituting one of those losses. I'm giving him some of those losses in there. It's gonna happen.
I just feel like I'm watching like Jat, who's Mufasa here, hang off the cliff, and then Kobe, who's Scar, and he's just like, no, it throws him off.
I'm so conflicted on this series. I want to hear what you say first.
I think SKT will win.
Yeah.
The thing is that RNG to me are still.
What's the score?
Blasphemy.
I think it's 3-1. The thing is that like RNG still just win or move forward because of their team fighting. They're like, Uzi's got 2 items. We have the Ardent Sensor and the Janna. Like, let's go team fight people. And I just think against SKT, unless Bang absolutely gets just smacked down in lane phase, which I don't think they're going to make the same mistake as they did in groups and actually give him good matchups, then that's when RNG can, leapfrog ahead of SKT and just run over the map because they build up a massive gold lead and then have the stronger 5v5s. But if it is ever even, RNG will always look for the team fight to swing an advantage as opposed to setting up a siege or setting up their side lanes and then maybe getting an advantageous team fight. And against SKT, because their team fighting has been so fucking good, that's when things get really scary for me. So I just think the way that they want to win the game is really terrifying for what SKT have actually been good at this tournament.
All right, I'm going to give an oddly specific prediction. It is 3-2 SKT with at least a 2-1 deficit at some point in the series.
That's oddly specific.
So they might be down 4-1 but they're still going to win.
What will
3-2.
not happen?
I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, they will be down.
That's the maximum that you can be down before losing.
You can be down 2-0.
Okay.
And then reverse sweep.
Okay.
So someone's gonna. So what? RNG will run ahead, and then SKT will. Where does?
Yeah.
Do you have the specifics
RNG,
of who comes back?
RNG will get ahead in the series 2-1, but whenever it's the elimination game, SKT will run the table.
What's the draft, Jat? What's the first pick?
Yeah. Well, Kalista will be banned on red side. I can guarantee that. I'm really excited for this series.
Sweet. I get all the credit if they win, then.
If they 3-2 win, I'm going to be like, this just defies all of my expectations.
I don't know.
If RNG wins game 5.
The ultimate narrative here, like if Worlds is actually scripted, especially for China, it's that Team WE and RNG both move into the final, and then Uzi has his ability to win a championship. He goes up 2 games, and then Team W are like, revenge for summer, and then reverse sweep him.
Well, oh my God.
I think it's a better script if SKT lose in the finals.
Yeah, I was gonna, because isn't WE, like if we're actually just saying what is the greatest like storyline ever, isn't WE the most famous team in the LPL?
No, they're actually considered underdogs.
Even if they're underdogs, like don't they have a larger fandom than RNG?
No.
Is it about the same?
Not right now. No. So how it works right now is it's
RNG's all Chinese, baby. Let's go.
That's true.
It's RNG, EDG, and OMG are kind of the big 3 squads, and then Team WE actually lost a lot of their fans or didn't gain a lot of fans even at MSI because they didn't perform very well, and they're just considered like their reputation in China is that they're an underdog, young, inexperienced team, and they're trying to kind of like climb back to their legacy.
All right. It's Uzi winning Worlds and reverse sweep.
Gets his championship. Never got a domestic championship. Got the international one.
Said Uzi losing Worlds in a reverse sweep.
Because it would just be.
That's the darkest timeline. That's so dark.
It's so bittersweet.
No, it's gonna be the hipster vote of SKT's time to lose. They're gonna lose.
Yeah, the thing that I'm most worried about is just Korea 6-0ing next week, because like we had this huge long discussion just now about how RNG is like super good, but what if the week over week improvement just kicks in? Right, and SKT is just so much better late game than RNG and smash them.
My rebuttal is: did you watch the quarterfinals?
Yes.
I watched all of them.
Okay.
I cast like everything, Kobe.
I was super in your boat.
I'm worried about it, right?
Yeah.
But based on quarterfinals, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
Exactly, because like going into quarterfinals, I was like, I really hope the Misfits can compete. It's probably going to be ugly though. SKT will probably improve so much, but I feel like if you didn't improve enough from groups to quarters, you're not going to improve that much more into the next stage, unless it's just like a paradigm shift. It's like, okay, actually we're doing this pick wrong, or like one specific thing. It's like, Peanut, actually we were wrong to have you playing defensive, like go nuts and play like a Lee Sin only, and then he just pops off, and like that's the only way I see like this complete shift, because otherwise they're probably going to be generally the same.
All right, you're our social media manager today. Do you have Twitter questions for us?
The one
For
Twitter
the
question
dad law.
that I had, and let me try to pull this up here.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a question about. It didn't say the thing, unfortunately.
All right.
It's basically a question
Nailing
about
it.
what do you
He's
think
fired.
about one of five first seeds actually getting to the quarterfinals versus the 3 of the 4 third seeds getting to the quarterfinals.
The gap is closing. That's what that means.
What how does that mean the number 3 teams in regions are as good
Yeah.
as the number 1 team in regions? Would that that's the gap you would be talking about?
Okay, because I think the idea is, the joke is always that the Koreans are just ultimately so much better. And I do think that the Korean teams of the LCK is still the strongest region. But like even the disparity or the gap between, the number 1 seed and the number 3 seed, like I think Cloud9 for the adaptation that they made in, this tournament, if you have Cloud9 and TSM go into a best of 5, I think that's a really cool matchup, and I think Cloud9 have a really good shot of winning that. The fact that Gigabyte Marines are still giving people, a run for their money, are still consistently taking games. It wasn't just that one-off at MSI. I think holistically, and I think a lot of it has to do with the meta and how the meta has shifted, and that I don't want to say like it takes away from the smarter macro play because there's no longer lane swap and things like that. Like I still think there are very clever ways to play the map or to define strategy, especially in the 10-man system. But it is a very heavy execution based on team fighting, individual skill meta that can run away with games. And I think teams are exploiting that. I mean, my region has really strong ADCs, so it's no wonder to me that we made semifinals here. But I think there is a good case to say that the teams and all regions are much closer than they really ever have been before. And you can see that in the competition at this tournament.
And the question came from Koopy, so thank you, Koopy, for the question. Kupi.
Okay.
Koopy?
Koopy? I don't know.
I will say that it is a bit of a payoff for how good the regional playoffs were in every league. Like there were so many really close best of 5s in so many of the playoffs that it's not super surprising. Like the LPL from semifinals to finals to third place match, everything went 5 games. So really saying that this EDG was definitively better than Team W was hard. And even G2, who 3-0'd the final, had a 3-2 quarterfinal against Splice. Like the talent stack in those regions was pretty tight for most regions.
And I'm more of the opinion that it's more to do with the regional playoffs.
And it's unlucky that the number 1 seeds didn't make it through.
Exactly. Like there's small differences, but when I think about like just looking at it from North Americans' perspective, like Cloud9 have been such a good team for so long, in North America. They, ended up being the 3rd seed because they got upset by Dignitas in the playoffs, and I thought that was like a complete seemed kind of very surprising, right? It didn't seem like something that would be super repeatable for Dignitas. I didn't feel, because to me Cloud9 had been the better team for a while, but it's just one of those situations where then once they got in, they have a lot of games to play. They play through the play-in, they play through all these groups. You show like your strength, right? Because it's so many games to actually show. And just like how you talk about WE is the best team in China, right? But they came in as the number 3 seed. So I just think that the seeding doesn't really matter that much, like between the regions, like within your own region, if there's not a massive gap, it doesn't really make that big difference.
And then it's also about like how you're defining dominance. Like for me, it's not defined by clutch moments, because if it was, I think I would have to give it to RNG, but it's defined by consistency for me. So if I see a team that is consistently dominant, then that's who I'm going to award, like the best team in the region, which is why I stand behind Team WE. They were the most consistent team for the entire split.
Mm-hmm.
I found one more question since I thought we were firing Azael from social media manager.
Toby, you're our audio engineer and social media manager.
But then he came through anyway, so you're rehired here.
Yeah, we can be co-social media
Okay,
managers.
nice. We'd be a team.
Yeah.
This guy, okay. By the way, I picked him because his name is at 420 Dank Yoda.
Oh my God.
But he actually had a pretty good question that we were discussing something deeper on this question a little bit before, but this is a good opener to it. Is there such a thing as a perfectly balanced meta? Ooh. Because we were also discussing earlier the differences in world metas and how this year there was a goal of not making a bunch of very big changes patch-wise leading up to Worlds, so that theoretically you'd have like this really stable meta, and it'd be a good test for teams, and you'd really be able to have some competitive integrity and really judge.
Yeah, it's super interesting because we're seeing little variations of what you would have considered solved in the second week of group stage was vastly different than the first week of group stage, and then quarterfinals was vastly different than this. What was the exact question? Can there ever be a completely balanced meta?
Yeah, so he has 2 questions, but this is the second one, and it's, is there such a thing as a perfectly balanced meta?
My instant answer is no. Yeah, I just think no, because people's opinion on what is perfectly balanced is also so wildly different from person to person. Even if we went around this room and we're fairly like-minded people, we would all still disagree on what that actually means. And is perfectly balanced that every single role has exactly the equal chance to carry on every single champion, and every single champion can fit in every single role, and like, is that perfectly balanced? Then I think there's absolutely no chance, and that's what comes to my mind when it is that. But I think that we're closer to what I consider to be like a balanced meta now than we were before, because it's testing the teams on a patch that has been very similar for a long time, right? It's like, you had time to prepare, you had time to show different things. We have actually seen, despite the fact that it is Ardent Sensor, lol, haha, it's every game. We've seen a lot of different stuff. We've seen tons of adaptation. We've seen innovation. We've seen that be successful. So to me, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that this is a good meta, but I don't think a perfect meta exists.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, because people had previously brought up points of, what if we extend the duration of patches? Like, basically we have a longer period between patching, because naturally people eventually come up with counters to whatever meta develops, right? You're always searching, just because of, again, kind of the hipster mentality. A lot of people don't want to play just what is meta, and they get bored of that, and they're always looking for what will counter that, and then that thing suddenly becomes strong. And you see that a lot in games that don't have patches for months and months and months actually have shifts in meta as well, and that's kind of something that we stumbled a little bit into.
Well, this is the weird thing, is because I feel like in the past, a lot of times teams weren't willing to, or didn't see the value in actually pulling out new picks. I'm pretty surprised that we've seen so many, and that teams have finally found a victory for it, because we've been saying it forever. Like, just find that one pick that forces you to ban, and then best of series, and then it works. Teams didn't do that before, because the experimentation cost was too high, and it was better to just grind what everyone else was playing. So that is actually something we haven't seen before.
Like, was that wrong? Because I know that's the conventional wisdom is, it's too hard to practice that. But I've always believed that it wasn't.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is the value that you get out of surprising your opponent with a new strategy, like Caitlyn shoving down these turrets super early. Boom! First week, everybody wins with it, right? Then the two teams that did previously win with it in groups, it became a trap for them, and in the series between these two teams.
I will say though, even though we've had cool evolution from this, I would not want to see Spring Split start on this patch.
For sure.
Right? I'm tired of seeing Callista banned on the red side. I'm tired of Janna being a first picker ban priority. I'm tired of seeing Galio being so strong and every time it's picked by the best team. So I do, even if the game has the ability to morph and tweak itself and find a new pick that then becomes priority, I would actually still rather have large disruption in the offseason.
And I think a lot of the value again comes from the fact that you just have to have power for a super short window to find success at Worlds. Group stages, you literally only need to win 1 or 2 games, and it greatly increases your chances of moving on. So I think that's going to do it. This is a super long episode. You're welcome for the bundle pack.
Bundle pack of what?
Frosk is the bundle.
DLC.
She's bundled in.
$49.99.
The Dive DLC.
Yeah. Throw out our hashtags. You're part of the team, Azale. Go. Social media team. Go.
You can hit us up on Twitter. Keep sending us your questions. Hashtag the Dive LOL.
Yeah, make sure you do the hashtag. Because when we're looking for the questions, we literally just search the hashtag the Dive LOL. Otherwise, we
I also
probably
look
don't see it.
through the ads, but then you only see the most recent ones.
Yeah. But use the hashtag for sure. And remember, we are going to have the semifinals coming up, and I'm not going to try to say the North American times. I believe it is starting at 3 o'clock in China time in Shanghai.
Yeah?
Saturday and Sunday.
Nailing it. You got it. If it's 3 p.m., that's midnight. If it's 4 p.m., that's 1 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, so it should be starting at midnight then. It's going to be pretty hype. Thanks for coming on, Frosk.
Woo!